ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו יתברך וישבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו ולעולם ינקום ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה עודם ירן בעלמה ואמרו
Hello, I'm so glad we can be together this evening. Apologies all those who are joining us online and those who are with us in the room as we transition from our virtual Yom Kippur sound system to our able to be together in a smaller group for Shabbat sound system. Shabbat Shalom. It is a pleasure to welcome you, as I have been saying for the last couple weeks, but it is particularly appropriate tonight. If Jews believed in heaven, you would each have a spot in it for being here on the day after Yom Kippur. You certainly have a place in my heart and a place in my heaven, and how good it is, how wonderful that we can be together this evening. We turn now to pages 2 and 5 in our prayer book as we kindle the lights of Shabbat, as we recognize the sweetness of Shabbat with Kiddush. It is my pleasure to invite forward Congregational President Michelle Markowitz to join us on page 2 as we kindle those lights of Shabbat. As these Shabbat candles give light to all who behold them, so may we, by our lives, give light to all who behold us. As their brightness reminds us of the generations of Israel who have kindled light, so may we in our own day be among those who kindle light. Sorry to steal your thunder.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lechadlikner shel Shabbat.
Amen.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you, Michelle. And as we turn to pages 4 and 5, I'd invite you to rise if it's comfortable for you to do so, as we recognize the sweetness of Shabbat. Vayi Erev Vayivoker Yom HaShishi, Vayachulu HaShamayim V'ha'aretz V'chol Tevam, Vayachol Elohim Bayom HaShvi Malakto Asher Asa, Vayishbot Bayom HaShvi Mikol Malakto Asher Asa, Vayavarech Elohim Et Yom HaShavi, Vaykadesh Oto, Kivo Shavat Mikol Malakto Asher Bara Elohim Lasot. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu v'shabbat kodsho Be'ahava uvratzon hinchilanu zicharon l'maaseh v'reishit ki hu yom techila l'mikra'ei kodesh zeher l'tziyah mitzrayim ki vanu V'otanu kidashta mikol ha'amim v'shabbat kodshecha me'ahava uvratzon hinchatanu Baruch atah Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat. I invite you now to take your seats as we turn in our prayer books to page 12, continuing with Kabbalah Shabbat, welcoming this day. The pleasure of beginning this morning visiting some of our preschool classrooms. I got to be with our 4s this morning, and we were talking about the value of hachnasat orchim, of welcoming guests. We imagine a roof on a house, and we imagine windows that allow us to see out. And when we drew houses in the preschool, we made extra sure to draw those doors open really, really big, to allow wanted guests, to allow loved ones to be with us. It is in the spirit of Hachnasat Orchim, of welcoming guests, just as Abraham did by throwing open the doors, tent flaps of his tent wide in Torah, so too do we strive to do every day as we welcome loved ones into our midst, as we welcome Shabbat, as we turn to pages 20 and 21. There we find words of Lecha Dodi throwing open the doors to welcome even Shabbat to be with us on this day. invite you to rise.
La la la
while we are already standing, while we're already in the spirit of welcoming, I'd invite you to take this opportunity to turn one to another, to wish a Shabbat Shalom to those in your personal compass, north, south, east, and west. I invite you to take your seats as we continue now, page 24. We continue that welcoming, that hachnasat orchim, with welcoming God's ministering angels with words of Shalom Aleichem.
Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Melech, Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Malachem Nishalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Barchuni l'shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shuvchem l'shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Would you read with me the poetry on page 27 before we continue with our Chatzi Kaddish? Teach me, O God, a blessing, a prayer, on the mystery of a withered leaf, on ripened fruit so fair, on the freedom to see, to sense, to breathe, to know, to hope, to despair. Teach my lips a blessing, a hymn of praise, as each morning and night you renew your days. lest my day be today as the one before, lest routine set my ways.
Yitkadol v'yitkadosh Shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
V'amad yivrach yirotei v'yamlich malchotei. B'chayechon u'v'yom echad u'chayet echol beit Yisrael. Bagala, bagala, u'v'zman karev v'himru.
Amen.
Yehei Shmei Rabbah mevarach le'alam u'lam me'almaya yitbarach yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitala Shemei dekodesha Richu Le'ela mikol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata damiron me'alema v'himru. Amen.
Our Baruch Hu praise on page 28 prepares us for the formal start of our worship service. We rise, we stretch our physical bodies and our souls upward in prayer.
Lai, 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 lai. Lai, 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 lai. Lai, 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 lai. Lai, 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 lai. Lai, 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 lai. Lai, 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 lai,
Continuing perhaps our theme of poetry, would you join me on the bottom of page 31, a poetic interpretation of Ma'ariv Aravim, our prayer for the onset of evening? This is an hour of change. Within it we stand uncertain on the border of light. Shall we draw back or cross over? Where shall our hearts turn? Shall we draw back, my brother, my sister, or cross over? This is the hour of change, and within it we stand quietly on the border of light. What lies before us? Shall we draw back, my brother, my sister, or cross over? Baruch atah Adonai, hama'ariv aravim. Wisdom and wonder, passion and instruction, story and symbol, all of these things your Torah gives to us. And the more we devote ourselves to it, the more it grows and gives. What could be a truer token of your abiding love than this holiest of your works and the living language that gives it form? Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael, pages 34 and 35.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Elohim, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Levot Malchuto, Le'olam
be seated. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha
בכל לבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבבך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם לראות על ידך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך למען תזכרו עשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם אלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
I always wanted the day after Yom Kippur to feel differently than it does. I wanted, after having been in prayer all day, to have a day of freedom, to have a day where I could do whatever I wanted, to read a book, to not go to school, to not go to work, to be able to rest after doing all of that hard work. I still haven't yet internalized that the message of Yom Kippur is the very opposite, that after having done all of that hard work, we don't get a day of rest. For indeed, the people we are growing to be, the people we are striving and dreaming to be, requires constant attention, constant work. That the freedom Yom Kippur grants us isn't a freedom from those obligations, but a freedom to engage in them even more diligently. With that in mind, we turn to page 40 for our people's prayer of freedom, our Mi Chamocha praise. Would you join me in the English on the top of page 43? Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Adonai, help us to walk with good companions, to live with hope in our hearts and eternity in our thoughts, that we may lie down in peace and rise up, waiting to do your will. Baruch atah Adonai, Hapores Sukat Shalom, Elenu Val Kol Amo Yisrael, Ve'al Yerushalayim. Remembering that Shabbat is a covenant between God and the Jewish people for all time. Even the day after Yom Kippur, we join together on the top of page 44. Page 46, we find the beginning of our Shabbat Amidah. If it's comfortable for you to do so, I invite you to rise for our standing prayer. Adonai sifatai tiftach ufi yagiti latecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah. Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanora El Elyon, Gomer Chasadim Tovim, V'Koneh Hakol, V'Zocher Haseavot V'Imahot, U'Mevi Gula Livnei V'neihem, Leman Shemo Yahava, Melech Hoser U'Moshiach U'Magin. Baruch atah Adonai, Magin Avraham ve'Ezrat Sarah. Atah Gibor Olam Adonai, Mechayeh HaKol Atara ve'Hoshia, Morid Hatal, Mechaker Chaim ve'Chesed, Mechayeh HaKol berachamim Rabbi, Somech noflim verofech cholim, Umatir asurim, Umekayeh לשני עפר, מי כמוך בגבורות, ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה לחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי הכל. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בכל יום יעלוך סלה. ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש. To these traditional words of prayer, we add the prayers and meditations that can only come from our own hearts. I invite you to continue with the words of our sages through page 60, or to pray the silent prayers that can only come from each of us. And when you have finished your prayers, I invite you to be seated. Even as we gather on Shabbat, hopefully with a sense of peace in our hearts, we're cognizant of those for whom this isn't a day of rest, for whom this isn't a day of peace, those who are wrestling with ailments of mind, of body, of spirit. As we turn to page 253 in our prayer book for words of Mishaberach Lecholim, I would invite you, if you are so willing, to share the names of those of whom you are thinking as we pray for healing, not only that we might concert our prayers on their behalf, but also that we might concert our actions, a friendly phone call, an opportunity to visit if they're up for it. Our sages tell us can take away a bit of their pain. And so I would invite you to share those names at this time. Baruch atah Adonai Rofeh HaCholim. Blessed are you, God, who brings a measure of comfort to all who are ill. And together we say, Amen. Our cycle of reading Torah, one portion each week, ends with a poem, an epic poem. Not in terms of length necessarily, but in terms of content. According to one commentator, Nachmanides, it's so prescient that even if it were written by astrologers, and make no mistake, the early rabbis were no fans of astrologers, even if it was written by astrologers, he said, we would have no choice but to recognize its truth. In 12 verses, we read about Israel's past. In 12 verses, we read about Israel's present. In 12 verses, we read about Israel's future. It's a beautiful, poetic introduction that I want to focus on this evening. From chapter 32, verse 2, may my discourse come down as the rain, my speech distill as the dew, like showers on young growth, like droplets on the grass. Doesn't sound so much like Torah, does it? But it is indeed Torah that our sages see in this verse, understanding that life-giving rains are a metaphor for Torah itself. Rashi draws that connection rather explicitly. Rabbi Elimelech of Lezensk imagines both rain and Torah are the selfless acts of a creator and only for the benefit of us as humanity. Rabbi Simcha Bunim suggests that just as the value of rain isn't immediate when it falls, it takes a little while for it to be absorbed and used by flora and fauna alike, so too it is with Torah. When we learn, when we study, when we embrace Torah, we sow positive seeds for future long-term benefit, he writes. Tonight, I wanted to share with you a message to reinforce the messages of the entirety of Torah and of Yom Kippur just 24 hours ago. Think of today like January 2nd. Just as our resolve to hit the gym more and the sweets table less is challenged the very day after we make those resolutions, so too is our resolve to be better selves challenged the day after Yom Kippur. Who are we and who do we need to be in this world? What do we need to do to make our world and indeed the entire world better? Tonight, I want to share with you a story, an extended poem that I shared with our young people on Yom Kippur. Author Catherine Otoshi weaves together rhyme, turn of phrase, and clever verse, just as this week's Torah portion does, enriching us for the reading and for the lessons it contains. It's a phenomenal book written for children and adults alike, with a message that we all need to hear as we embrace our resolutions and our responsibilities for this new year. Whoa. And my television screens seem to be restarting themselves, taking away the thunder of the beautiful transition that would have led into the telling of a story. No, they're doing their thing. They're on. Come on, screens, you can do it. This was going to be a really cool thing to make use of the screens finally. All right. Maybe. The Wheel of Doom. I've never seen The Wheel of Doom. Leslie, let's give it a whirl. Let's see what happens.
2 by Catherine Otoshi. 2 was a playful number. She was curved on top, straight on the bottom, friendly and warm like the sun. Her best friend was 1. Whenever they'd get the chance.
With apologies for that slight snafu, we'll return to this.
2 by Catherine Otoshi. 2 was a playful number. She was curved on top, straight on the bottom, friendly and warm like the sun. Her best friend was 1. Whenever they'd get the chance, they'd dance. She'd sing and snap, he'd tippity-tap. What a pair they made. At the end of each day, they'd always say, 1, 2, I'll count on you. Till the end, we'll be best friends. Until 3 jumped in between them. You 2 are like glue, said 3, poking fun. Shake things up, come play with me, 1. Odds are better than the rest. 1 and 3 are best. 2 felt a shift. She watched 1 slowly drift away from her. 2 felt left out. Can I play too? She asked. You've had your time to play with 1, answered 3. We're playing odds only right now. 2 was blue. What did I do? 1 left without a word. Is it because I'm even and they're both odd? Let it go, said 0. Just ignore them, added 4. But 2 couldn't let it go. At every turn, what did she see? 1 playing with 3. 1, 3, odds will be, they'd say. 2 felt a little green. Her heart felt sick, and she began to crack. The evens rushed over to comfort their friend. Such a shame things aren't the same. 3 is silly, said 4. 1 can't be best friends with 3. It's unlucky, said 6. 1 and 3 are just plain odd. Let's get even with those odds, exclaimed 8. 5, 7, and 9 overheard the chatter. What's the matter? There's nothing wrong with being odd. Evens are great, stated 4, 6, and 8. Sometimes even greater than the odds. 0 saw the numbers collide. Why did everyone need to take sides? 5, 7, 9, we're odd and we're just fine, shouted the odds. 4, 6, 8, being even is first rate, yelled the evens. 0 watched this hullabaloo. She raced over to 2. The numbers are dividing. Now the odds are at odds with the evens, and the evens want to get even with the odds. 2 felt split. But what can I do? She asked. Half of me doesn't care about that odd pair. Maybe it's time for me to be done with 1. That's the smaller side of you talking, said 0. You're greater than that. The evens and odds are in a fight. What if you can make things right? Can you find it in your heart to see a new angle to this, possibly? To thought, and then, "You're right," she exclaimed, flipping herself around. "It is in me. I can be less than I've been, or greater than I am. The choice is mine." Tu pulled herself together and stood up tall. "I have something to say to you all. It's not easy to say, but I've come to see it's tricky to dance when there are three. One should have other friends, and the same goes for me." Three drooped. "I'm sorry, too," he said. "I see now that playing the odds wasn't fair to you." "Well, here's where we can all agree," said two. "When the dance turns and shifts, let's groove and flow. If you're holding too tight, let go. Dance to your own beat, do your own thing. Be free to explore what each new day can bring." "Explore," cheered four. "Dance and mix," said six. "Rock and roll," said seven. "Shake it up," they shouted. Soon all the numbers were dancing together, movin' and groovin', shimmyin' and shakin', spinning around like tops. "It's fun to dance with everyone," said the numbers. Two spun faster and faster, round and round. She got so dizzy that, oops, she bumped into one. He teetered and toppled and almost fell down, but two caught him. "Sorry," said two. "Me too," said one. Both said nothing for a while. Then one said softly, "Hey, two, can I still count on you?" Two looked at one and said, "It's the end, and guess what? We're still friends."
It's one of my favorite stories. I love the way the author turns a phrase. I love this message written for children, but that each of us as adults have yet to internalize in this challenged world in which we live. May we make the choices in the year ahead to be greater than what we ever thought possible. I'd invite you to turn back with me now in your Sidurim, back in your prayer books, to page 282 on the bottom of the page, as we begin to conclude our service with words of Elenu L'Shabbat. When you have found your page, I would invite you to rise. David Rulo, a year older and wiser, or at least a day older and wiser, on this day as you celebrate what I hope is a very happy birthday. It's a pleasure to have you open our ark as we join in song and prayer together.
Elenu L'Shabbat Adonai, Atid Gedulah Yotzei Bereshit, Shelo Asanu Kegoyim Aratzot, Velo Samanu K'mishpachot Adamah, Shelo Sam Chelkim Kalem, Vekol Aleinu Kekol Harona.
You may be seated. And with a quick secondary check on our technology, Leslie, would you switch the speakers back over? Thank you. She is farther ahead of this than I am. At this time in our service, we turn to page 294 as we remember those who have gone before us.
We mourn the passing of Jerry J. Barenbaum and Stephen Meyer, who were laid to rest in recent days, and observe the period of Shaloshim for Bernice Dolly Landay and Susan Cohen Rothman, and Ronald Watsman. We commemorate the yahrzeit, the anniversary of the passing of William Beck, Elizabeth Bernstein, Tina Rosenbleier, Avram Sipley, Cutla Sipley, Eliezer Sipley, Frida Sipley, John Crowley, Maud Dressner, Julia Katz-Gollum, Max Katz, Herbert Kindler, Clarence Klein, Rose Levine, Arthur Harris Levitt, Norma Lewis, Abraham Markovsky, Edward Mazarov, Israel Miller, Evelyn Mostow, Diane Ruth Motzman, Eli J. Myers, Ruth Noodleman, Sarah Pondulo, Israel Presser, Milton E. Rubin, Larry Daniel Seja, Ruth S. Sandler, Erwin Schwager, Seymour Slater, Howard Sloan, Murray Sperling, Jack Spicer, Samuel E. Trachtenberg, and Louette Williams.
To each of these loved ones, we add the names we hold in our hearts this Shabbat. If I have inadvertently mispronounced the name of a loved one, or if there are others you are thinking of, I invite you to share their name at this time. Yehi zichronam livracha. May the memory of all of our loved ones be for us an everlasting blessing. As we affirm together words of Kaddish Yatom, page 294, I would invite you to rise. Yit gadal v'yit kadash shemei rabbah, be'alma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chaye chon uv'yomei chon, uv'chaye d'chol beit Yisrael, Ba'gala v'izman kariv v'imru. Amen. Yehi shemei rabbah mevorach leolam ulamei amaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh. V'yithadar v'yitalev v'yithalal shemei d'kudsha b'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechamata. Damiran v'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehi shalama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim Elenu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu yaseh shalom, Elenu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. May God, who makes peace in the highest of heavens, make peace for us and for all who mourn. And together we say, Amen. You are welcome to be seated again. A special thank you to our student cantor, Sierra Fox, for rallying after putting your voice to the test for the days before to enrich our Shabbat in music. To you, Jim Burns, for wearing a divot in that bench. We are grateful to have you this Shabbat, and so often to our executive director and executive producer, Leslie Hoffman, who makes it all possible, and to each of you who have joined us on this Shabbat. I'm grateful for the chance to pray together at the start of this new year. Our concluding song this evening, words of Adon Olam, which we can find in our prayer books on page 321.
Adon olam Hashem malach, b'terem kol yitzir nivra, leit lasav v'chefetzo kol, azay melech shemo nikra, ve'acharei
Shabbat Shalom.